You were at Lake Rant, where I rant about whatever my $10 a month plus patrons want me to rant about. You can get one of these by being one of those. This one's for Alvy, who says, rant about the Persona series. I'm honestly shocked I have not done this already. I know I've talked about the games, but I don't know where. So, let's go over them again, shall we? I have not played the first Persona game at all. I have been interested in giving it a shot. I also have not played Persona 2 Innocent Sin, but I have played Persona 2 Eternal Punishment. And I really love the art style of the game. The character designer is one of my favorites of all time, who works for the Shin Megami Tensei franchise. I really love the way the characters look in that 2D pixel art style that is used for like the character portraits. The game is extremely in-depth, and I wasn't that interested in getting into its depth, partly because it is so grindy. Like, so much of getting into the fusion system would involve grinding in the, like, underground labyrinth dungeon, which just seemed boring as fuck. And I also just didn't understand the mechanics at the depth that I really should have to engage with the game. You know, I played this back in, like, 2012. I wasn't that good at RPGs back then. But, you know, I had been really into it for the first half. I loved particularly all the parts where you just explore the town. Like, my favorite part of most games that I play really is getting to know the world and the people in the world. So for me, the fact that every time you would come back from doing a dungeon, everybody in town would have new dialogue was really exciting, because it meant I could go around and talk to everybody, and it would give me time to like really hang out before I go back into doing dungeons. But as the game goes on, not only do the dungeons become more and more of a slog because they get longer and longer and require more and more preparation, and a lot of them are just fucking full of traps and bullshit that make you go back. It's the dungeon design is heinous in that game. But the townsfolk would have less of interest to say, or not even new dialogue all the time. Your own partner characters, like at some point the story becomes about saving the world, because originally it's about like solving a mystery, then it becomes about saving the world, and at that point everybody has the same dialogue. It's very boring. So it just becomes a game about playing dungeons, basically. And it gets really difficult as it ramps up, like where if you haven't been grinding, then the dungeons are really fucking hard. However, the final dungeon, which is supposed to be this insanely long, difficult gauntlet, is actually bypassable. If you just go through, like, if you know your way through it, basically, you can bypass fighting. So I did that and made it to the final boss, but the final boss is preposterously difficult in this game. It's like one of those where you would have to have all the ultimate shit to beat him. Like, when I finally watched somebody do it in a YouTube video, because I wasn't going to even fucking attempt, like, I couldn't even beat his first form. Or maybe I did beat his first form and then, like, immediately got eradicated by the second form or something like that. But, like, it was like a 15-minute video where this guy was maxed out on all stats and was doing, like, 9,999 damage every hit. Ridiculous. So, you know, I ultimately just watched the ending on YouTube. I felt kind of mid about the game overall. Persona 3 was the first one I played, and for a long time I considered it to be like my favorite video game on the basis of having played like 8 hours of it, purely based on the aesthetic. I mean, first of all, the cutscenes, which are, I think, very Serial Experiments Lain inspired, were really cool. The iconography of the Dominator. It basically, the game is made to resonate with, like, edgy 14-year-olds of exactly the type that I was at the time. And I was uniquely predisposed to it because I actually was a fan of, like, Boogie Pop and Lane and all this shit that it was actually paying homage to that most people would not have picked up on at the time. So I was totally in love with the game on that level, but I never got around to playing more of it over the years. Because I became an anime blogger, and since then I have never had time to finish anything, but except for Final Fantasy X. But you know, I finally started watching May play it a couple of years ago, almost 2 years ago, and like she played through a significant amount of it, but eventually, like, watching the cutscenes and stuff, I really got the sense that this game was meant to be like the lighter, more teenage version of what Shin Megami Tensei is about. Like, it's more accessible, it's more emotional, the characters are younger, the dialogue is kind of more basic, it's the systems take, they introduce themselves to you at a more gentle rate. It's just like, I mean, obviously there's a lot more to the Persona games than there is to the traditional Shin Megami Tensei games, in that they have this whole social dynamic aspect. But does that actually enrich the story for me? Like, most of the characters you talk to, like, basically what kind of wore me out on the game was that the social interactions don't ever go anywhere interesting. Like, there's tons of people you can talk to and make connections with, but their stories are really one note and boring. And a lot of the times you can go on, like, you can spend time with somebody and it doesn't even progress the narrative in any way. It just says, like, you hung out with them, And it's just the length of time it takes for anything to happen, and the lack of any of those things really being that interesting kind of made me feel like, man, I kind of lost interest in this game now. I would much rather play the Shin Megami Tensei main series games, or Digital Devil Saga, or these games that seem, grittier and more robust and more like kind of freaky and alienating and weird. I want to check that stuff out because it aesthetically resonates more with me than the more like anime-fied Japanese high school, characters that, while obviously are easy for me to accept and enjoy a story with characters like that, just don't have the same immediate appeal to me as a game about fucking Devilman, which Shin Megami Tensei 4 seems to be. So, I want to play that game. Maybe I will at some point. God, I hope so.